Hey everybody, we are heading to Windrock. We're going to take some pictures. We're going to give you guys some tips and tricks for mountain bike photography along the way. I'm going to meet up with Amy Wheats out there. First, I want to thank the guys from Cardinal Camera for getting me the Sony A1 so fast. It was kind of a rush to get it out there, which it brings us to our first tip. Find the local camera shop if you're interested in getting into photography. Those guys can help you out a ton and they can show you a lot physically on your camera. But anyway, roll the intro. We'll see you out there.
Welcome to Squatch Bikes.
What's up everybody? James here with Squatch Bikes. I'm out here today with Amy Wheats, Amy Wheats Photography. We're out at Windrock. It's the Tennessee National Downhill and Enduro race. We'll be here all weekend taking pictures. We thought we'd do something a little bit different because the results of this race will be kind of old by the time this airs. We are going to go over some photography and some tips. Amy's going to kind of take us along and she's going to give us a bunch of tips for those looking to get their first camera. Just some tips for settings, for creative style, things like that. And we're also going to catch up hopefully with Heather of heathercarter photography, ask her about a couple of tips she may want to give. But anyway, let's get taking pictures. Right now I'm just trying to get a good sense of place. Red Bull, the full drop in there with the rider coming right off the lip of it. Hopefully they turn their bike a little bit, gives it a little bit more depth. It's nice when you get a couple of guys come down together. This is the pro downhill practice. Hopefully we'll get some faster guys coming down here real soon. Totally missed that. We're getting the rider coming off the side of the drop rather than like a head-on or from behind. So we're still getting the Red Bull in there. We're still getting a big chunk of the drop. This shot's working out. It's just, it's fast. It's tough to get. So you're trying to anticipate the riders as they come through. And there's a shot up there that actually looks pretty good just as I sit here and watch. And that's, I think, a huge part of it, like trying to set up your shot, figuring out exactly where the rider is going to go and being ready for that area, kind of practicing moving over that area with through the camera. It increases your chances of getting it. Hey, so we caught up with Heather from heathercarter photography and her husband over there, Elliot. And I just wanted to ask Heather, what are a couple of tips that you would give to a beginner photographer, especially with the action sports?
So I would say once you find a camera to start with, throw that thing on manual, figure out what everything does, what ISO does, aperture, shutter speed, how they all relate to each other, and just shoot anything that moves. The more field time you get, the more time on your camera you get, the better. That way you can figure out how it works, what works, and that brings me to my second tip is finding your style. So not necessarily trying to do what everyone else is doing or trying to be like someone else. Find your own style and then go with that. And this stuff takes a while. I mean, you know, it takes years. I'm still developing, I'm still learning.
Awesome. Heather, we'll see you up on the mountain.
Yeah.
So Amy, what would be 2 tips that you would give to a beginner photographer that's looking to get into shooting something like mountain biking or an action sport?
But just really learning how your camera works, just basic settings, ISO, aperture, shutter speed. And then just being able to play around with that type of stuff. So just getting out there, shooting as much as you can, and then just learning the differences that you need. Like when you're shooting action sports versus portraits, it really matters to have your shutter speed like high so that you get that crisp image. But portraits, like, you can really open it up a bit more.
So we've discussed a couple of tips from Amy and Heather. Both of them have talked about learning your settings and creating your own style. We also want to talk about the cameras themselves, choosing the right camera for the job. So we want a camera that can have a high shutter speed. Interchangeable lenses, that's kind of what we're talking about here. So like the a6000 series from Sony and above. a6000 is their crop sensor cameras. When you get above that into their A7 series, you're getting into full frame. And the lenses, so you can take basically any Sony lens across their mirrorless system and swap them out. They're all interchangeable. So you get the E-mount, and if you start out with an A6000 and you buy a very expensive lens, you can carry that lens through all the way up to the Alpha 1. So that's super good to me because you're not reinvesting in glass constantly. So the camera body can grow and you can still have really fantastic glass. So that's about it for like the basics of your cameras. Get an interchangeable lens camera, crop sensor or full frame. The a6000 series is awesome to start with from Sony. And you just kind of go from there and start taking pictures like you said. Check out YouTube videos for settings and then finding your own creative style. That's something that I think that really takes a long time, is finding that creative style.
Yeah.
Amy and I are back here now. We're gonna do some editing on the photos. We talked a little bit about creative style, and creative style comes from a lot of different places. One of those places is in just the composition of the photographer, the way they see it, the way they frame it up. Another way though is in the editing, and that seems to be a pretty big one right now. So we're gonna go through kind of a comparison of some very, very similar shots that we took literally within a thousandth of a second. We'll see how Amy edits those and how I edit them, just to give you a little bit of the difference in style. So this, in this photo here, Amy and I literally caught Ben Hobbs, a friend of ours, during the Enduro race at Windrock, and we caught it within probably a thousandth of a second.
Yeah.
And we're probably sitting about 6 feet apart, 8 feet apart at that point on the side of a hill. I'm gonna just let Amy talk to you about her photo, kind of how she edited it, and then we'll switch over to my photo and kind of show you the difference in that creative style.
Yeah, so for all of my photos, I have a certain preset that I kind of use as my base. So I just kind of plop that on there and then make any minor adjustments that I need to, just depending on what the lighting was like that day. So usually there's a little adjustment to exposure. So like this photo, I barely bumped it up. It was pretty much perfectly exposed off the get-go. I usually drop my highlights way down just because I like how that looks and it fits my style. It also kind of sometimes flattens out things a little bit, which works for me. And then sometimes I'll play around a little bit with the vibrance, nothing super crazy, maybe a little dehaze because it was a little foggy that morning.
And then with mine, which is basically the exact same photo, I actually go through and I touched up the exposure just a little bit, but I like the contrasty photos, so I take my contrast up pretty high. I also dump my highlights, but I use a little bit more warmth to my photos, so I will take the little temperature bar in Lightroom and just bump it up. It gives a little bit more color, has a few things pop a little bit more. So yeah, here's Richie Rude. He was bombing down this section, flip-flopping from one side of the trail to the other. Again, Amy and I caught it within 10,000th of a second. As far as the composition goes, I like showing a little bit of the trail, a little bit more sense of place. And then again, love getting the rider's eyes. I like how you got the tree there.
Yeah, so kind of having that little extra bit to just split it up. For this one, I did pretty much the same as the first photo, just a little bit adjustment to the exposure, barely at all. Highlights are dropped, shadows are raised just a little bit. Especially in that setting that we had, I noticed when you lifted up the shadows, you can really see their face so much easier. It was like, and we're there.
Yeah.
So that was pretty nice. And then for this one, just because he did go through these leaves and spew up a whole bunch of dirt, I upped the clarity a little bit just so that looked that much crisper.
Clarity does some weird stuff.
If you go too far, it makes it look, you can
It
tell
looks like it's painted almost.
Yeah.
Or like somebody like literally painted it with a brush or something. It gives it kind of an odd look to it. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. These were just a few quick tips and tricks to get you guys going with mountain bike and action photography. So get out there, take tons of pictures, practice, and if you're in the Brevard area, come ride with us.